We now continue with our narration of L.W. deLaurance's The Master Key. We are in Unit 3, Chapter 18. Lesson 15 was Attention. This is Lesson 16, Observation. Do we all perceive the same thing? It is a common fallacy that an object sends the same retinal image to every eye, and that therefore every eye must see alike. Psychologists are able to prove that this is erroneous. Apart from the part that experience plays in observation, pathological conditions must be taken into account. As a general rule, it may be said that we merely see what we have seen before. That is, in some way or other, a new object is generally related to something we have seen in the past. Before continuing, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, Mind Voltage Institute, please take a moment to do it right now. And at the same time, activate the notification bell feature to be apprised of our new uploads. Immediately below your media player window, you will see the thumb up icon. Please click on that to instantly and easily share the joy of this channel with others. Further down in the video description area, you will see donation by PayPal information. Please make a note of that. What is involved in observation? To observe does not mean simply to stare at an object. What we see in any field of view, like, as spread before us, depends on what we bring with us to that field. The difference, therefore, between a trained observer and an untrained one is the difference between their experience. An object may send the same retinal image to two observers, but the interpretation of the message depends not on the physical eye, but the mental eye. In other words, the mind behind the eye. A botanist will see more in a flower, or a geologist in a stone, because they know more about flowers and stones. It is this that makes Professor James say, a blind man like Huber, with his passion for bees and ants, can observe them through other people's eyes better than these can through their own. That is in Talks to Teachers, William James. Let a farmer, a naturalist, a geologist, a surveyor, or an artist look at the same view, and each will see something that the other does not see. For each interprets the view according to the stock of knowledge representing his past experience. No one observer can see all that takes place in front of him. For experience apart, what you see depends on what you attended to, and you cannot attend to everything. Even a camera cannot register all of a view, for the photograph only represents those parts to which the photographer wishes to give prominence. To a very great extent, observation is subjective. That is, it is the work of the mental eye which sees a very different object to the physical eye. Conjuring tricks, illusions, the mistakes we overlook when reading all illustrate the subjective element in observation. Again, the eye does not always see the same picture when looking at an object. To demonstrate this, by personal observation, look closely at the cubes shown in the accompanying illustration. First, look at them and see whether there appears to be 6 cubes or 7 cubes. Second, turn the illustration upside down and you will find there appears to be only 6 cubes. By looking at the cubes from different angles, you will see sometimes only 6 and then sometimes 7 cubes. You will also see the cubes change right before your eyes from 6 to 7 and from 7 to 6. This well illustrates what I mean by affected perception and an optical illusion. Our eyes are constantly deceiving us, and they require constant watching and checking. For what they seem to register may be very far from what they do register. It is owing to this that the reports of different observers show such variation, even when the observers are beyond reproach. How perception is affected. Perception is affected in many ways, and students should know the importance of these. so as to be on their guard as occasion arises. First, expectation is perhaps the commonest and thereby one of the principal means whereby perception is affected. You see what you expect to see. You go to a conjuring entertainment. The conjurer tells you, first of all, what he is going to do. You expect him to do it. Therefore, you see him do it. Were he not to make his directive statements, you would see in many instances something quite different from what you think you see. If you were not so careful to watch his right hand at his bidding, you would see him doing the trick with his left hand. Experiment when the next time you go to a conjuring entertainment. Disobey the conjurer's directions and glances, and you will see something the conjurer does not wish you to see, unless he is even too quick for you. Conjurers themselves employ this method when they wish to discover the secret of a brother conjurer's tricks. If they do not discover the secret on a first visit, they will pay a second or third. Faulty inference is really the rock on which we split in expectation. When we know that a certain effect always follows from a certain cause, if we think we detect the cause, then we expect the result to follow, just as 2 + 2 = 4. Therefore, when you see a violinist's bow in a diminuendo at the end of his solo, still slowly traveling over a string, you think that it is touching the string when it may not. You have always associated a traveling bow as in contact with a string. Hence, when the violinist tricks you with the moving bow, you think the sound is still dying away beyond reach of your ears. It is therefore an easy matter to deceive a person. If you lead him to believe you are making certain movements which he has already associated with certain acts, if he thinks he sees the cause, he is certain he sees the effect. Note, too, how a ventriloquist works on your expectation. He tells you that the voice you hear proceeds from a man on the roof. Without this direction from him, you could just as easily imagine the voice as that of a man in the cellar. You hear what you expected to hear. Second, interest affects perception. Interest affects perception. If you receive a letter which you have been expecting and in which you are greatly interested, grammatical slips in the letter will probably be overlooked by you, and important details may be only half grasped. Likewise, when your interest in a book is keen, you will probably never notice a single misspelling or typographical error. An author often passes error after error in his proofs. His interest in the subject matter is too keen. Months after, when to a great extent his interest has died out, he will notice these errors. The faults of interest are due to the mental eye which sees what it expects to see. Put this to experiment. Tell a friend you are going to expose him to a word on a card for just 1/5 of a second. Tell him the word represents something he wears on his head and show him on a card. Hat. Write it fairly large and distinct. He will expect to see some such word as hat. He will therefore read it as hat. Now, if you wish to guard against the mental eye in reading, you must train yourself to see the individual letters of a word, for as a rule, we only see words as wholes, hence the mistakes we make in passing misspellings, transposed letters, etc. Interest can inhibit a retinal image entirely. A student may A student examining an object through his microscope rarely sees anything with the disengaged eye. His interest and intentness act as an arresting influence on the stimuli sent to the eye that is disengaged. Third, excuse me again, the customary or familiar greatly affects perception. We are so accustomed to see our friends day after day that we do not notice signs of ill health in them, unless very pronounced. We saw also how our familiarity with words as wholes prevents our seeing misspellings, etc. But often familiarity plays us another trick in reading. We fail to note the omissions of words like the, and, but, in, with, etc. Our mental eye supplies these. This fault is often responsibility for serious mistakes in business. A businessman often thinks he has read in a letter or order what he has not read. It is only when a correspondent asks him to reread the letter that he sees the error. Some businessmen actually trade on this weakness in their advertisements, on their tickets. Words which totally alter the meaning of their statements are put in small print or in a place not likely to be noticed, as hand sewn in a boot or shoe advertisement will illustrate this. Note, the ear too is deceived by this subjective element. An old conundrum will illustrate this. A farmer had 26 sheep. 5 of them died. How many did he have left? If you ask a person to solve this, taking care to speak the conundrum quickly and naturally, you will find that hardly anyone will notice the word sick. Their ears will interpret it as 6, and they will answer 21. That's 26 minus 5. Or they will reply 21 alive and 5 dead, and so on. It is only a student of phonetics or one familiar with such conundrums who will likely to detect where the key to the conundrum lies. Students should concentrate their attention on a person's conversation and see if they can detect any omitted words or words wrongly or carelessly pronounced. Quick speakers supply the best tests. Try also the following experiments on your friends. First, ask them if they have ever seen a black plant with yellow leaves. Plant, P-L-A-N-D, a black plant. In the majority of cases, they will think you are asking about a black plant. Second, repeat the lines. There was a green hill far away without a city wall. Ask your friends if they detect any error. Very, very few of them will notice the omission of the H's in the word hill. Familiarity with a town, as you saw under how inattention may be turned into attention, tends to lessen attention with respect to details in the town. Familiarity with a town tends to lessen attention with respect to details in the town. Similarly, a shopkeeper will not notice the disorderliness of the shop or the service given by his assistants through long familiarity with the same, while a stranger will notice these at once. Shopkeepers should therefore get away from their business occasionally and visit shops in other towns. This will often open their eyes to many faults in their own shops on their return home. In crossing out letters, as for instance in crossing out O's, we make fewer errors, like past the O's, where the subject matter has no interest for us, as in unfamiliar foreign language. Familiarity and interest act as an arresting influence. They hurry us along and we omit to cross out many of the O's. A quick, intelligent reader is apt to pass errors that a slow reader of lesser intelligence will probably notice, where both are ignorant of concentrative methods. Teachers of the first class are liable to pass errors in the exercises of their pupils, especially errors in spelling, which teachers of the second class will notice. The reason being that the former's grasp of the words as totals is too rapid. Note, the ear is likewise affected by familiarity. The character of sounds may be entirely altered in this way. Thus, if a violinist plays for any length of time on a violin, which at first appeared to him to be harsh in tone, in time he will not notice this harshness so much. The illusion will vanish, however, as soon as he plays on a better instrument. Fourth, emotion. Emotion is answerable for defective perception. A person under the stress of emotion is never a reliable witness. The following will illustrate this. Dramatic psychological experiments are very popular with many professors of psychology. The professor will be lecturing to his students when suddenly the door will open with a loud bang, and in will rush two men, followed perhaps by a policeman. There will be a scuffle, words will be spoken by the parties, a revolver will be fired, and the professor will perhaps take a part in the scene by ordering the intruders out. And then, as suddenly as they appeared, the actors in the scene will rush out of the door. The professor will then appear greatly moved by the unpleasant incident and will ask a certain number of the students to write a report of what has taken place. The whole scene will have taken only half a minute, and yet these students who have been trained to observe will vary in their statements, as have been trained to observe, will vary in their instruments, as to the time from a second or two to several minutes, while their reports as to the dress of the actors, their speech, their actions, etc., will likewise show considerable variations. Some of their statements will be false, others inaccurate, others pure invention, while many will perhaps fail to observe at all to the leading features of the scene. Even where the audience has comprised men of the greatest attainments in science, the results have been very similar, proving that the best of us are very fallible and our observations are not to be trusted when under the influence of emotion. Students should therefore guard against from giving away to emotion if they wish to have perfect control of themselves and their faculties. Number 5, fifth, breathing. Any obstruction of breathing not only affects perception, but also our general efficiency. Children suffering from adenoids are never so good at their studies as are children whose nasal passages are normal. Many know when suffering from a cold in the head, when the nose is stuffed up, how it affects their efficiency. They feel it impossible to give things the same attention as usual. Sixth, fatigue or any exertion affects perception. Most all readers know how a book seems to be blurred and the print run together when they attempt to read when thoroughly tired. But even when we are only slightly fatigued, our perceptive powers are affected. Experiment as follows. Go through some form of physical exercise of a slightly tiring nature, or run up and down the stairs a few times, or run 100 yards at top speed. Now attempt to read small print. You will not see it so clearly as before exerting yourself. 7th, habit. Habit greatly affects perception. When we are accustomed to do things in an automatic way, we are liable to overlook the necessity of varying the same to meet changed conditions. The following will serve to illustrate this. An old cocoa mat at an office door was replaced one day by a new one. The new mat was, of course, slightly higher than the old one, which usage had worn down. It was noticed that each clerk entered or left the office, the first day or so after the new mat had been put down, that he has stumbled. At each stumble, they noticed the new mat. And in a day or two, the stumbling ceased. Unconsciously, each clerk had adjusted his leg movement to meet the new conditions. Eighth, mist interferes with perception. Objects near at hand, seen through mists, appear to us to be distant. Artists make use of this fact in their pictures when they wish to convey the idea of distance. Ninth, time exposure greatly affects perception. Laboratory experiments have shown that where the time exposure, as in showing words, letters, or figures on a board, is reduced from 1 second to 1/10 of a second, the number of words, letters, or figures seen is reduced considerably. The results are more marked in the case of children than in adults. Now, I'm going to stop there, halfway through lesson 16. The second half involves a variety of diagrams that are best seen than just heard about. So I'll wait until I have my visual capacity, my capacity for being seen has returned here. So that's the end of this one. The next will be the continuation of lesson 16, perception, and its first paragraph is as thus: how practice quickens perception. The stock illustration of how practice quickens perception is that of Howden, the conjurer, and his son. His name was Houdini, but his real name was Houdin, Houdin, the conjurer, and his son. They began with 1 or 2 dominoes, merely glancing at them, and then giving the sum of their points. Through long practice, they attained such skill as to be able to give at a glance the sum of the points on 12 dominoes. Next, they extended their glancing to shop windows, to the contents of rooms as they passed through, until they attained such proficiency as to appear miraculous to anyone unacquainted with their methods and the long training they had undergone. But that's for the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, get notified, share, like, make note of the donation by PayPal information, and donate. I'm Dirk Strongman, current resident at Mind Voltage Institute. This has been Unit 3, Lesson 18, Chapter 18, Exercise 18, Lesson 16, Perception, in L.W. deLaurance's The Master Key.